Okay. We shall start.
We shall start. Okay. Herzlich willkommen zu unserem Webinar. Wir wollen Ihnen heute einige Hinweise und Best-Practice-Beispiele geben, wie Sie mithilfe professioneller B2B-Kommunikation in den USA Ihre Bekanntheit erhöhen und so mehr Kunden gewinnen können. Mein Name ist Anne Weber-Plömacher. Ich bin Senior Consultant bei BSK. Das ist eine PR-Agentur in der Nähe von Düsseldorf, genauer gesagt in Willich. Wir sind spezialisiert auf Unternehmenskommunikation und Public Relations. Ich selbst habe über 25 Jahre Erfahrung in der PR-Branche und arbeite seit vielen Jahren mit internationalen Kunden und Agenturpartnern. Ich vertrete heute unsere Prokuristin Jutta Lorberg, die leider an Corona erkrankt ist. BSK ist deutscher Agenturpartner im internationalen Agenturnetzwerk Plexus. Wir haben Partneragenturen in verschiedenen europäischen Ländern, dem Mittleren Osten sowie Nord- und Südamerika. Das heutige Webinar ist Teil unserer neuen Plexus Market Insights Serie, bei der Plexus-Agenturen Einblicke in verschiedene Märkte geben wollen. Ich freue mich deshalb besonders, heute meinen lieben Kollegen Peter Barron von Carabiner Communications in Atlanta begrüßen zu dürfen. Das Webinar wird auf Englisch stattfinden, aber Sie sind herzlich eingeladen, jederzeit Ihre Fragen auch auf Deutsch in den Chat zu schreiben. Wir werden uns bemühen, möglichst viele Ihrer Fragen am Ende des Webinars zu beantworten. So, let's switch to English. Good morning, America. Good morning, Peter.
Good afternoon, Germany. Anna, it's good to see you.
Peter, it's good to have you today with us. Let me quickly introduce you to the participants of today's webinar. Peter Barron has 3 decades of communication and marketing experience and is not only heading up Carabiner, but is also in the driving force for sizing new opportunities in the marketplace for Carabiner's clients. Over the course of his career, Peter has directed campaigns for B2B startups, as well as for such well-known names as Apple Computer, Ericsson, GE, and IBM. He received a bachelor's degree in journalism and PR from the University of Utah, and as a frequent speaker, Peter has delivered addresses and lectures at Emory University and Georgia Tech, as well as at American Marketing Association and Public Relations Society of America conferences. So let's dive in. Peter, what best practices can you share with regards to the US market? What do German businesses have to consider if they want to broaden their footprint in the US?
Thank you, Anna. That's a great introduction. I appreciate that very much. Let me just cover what we'll go over in our webinar today. I'm going to speak briefly about Carabiner, our agency, and then we're going to talk about doing business in the United States a little bit. Then we'll dig into PR and how that can be important in helping you to drive sales. We'll talk about understanding the US media landscape, and then we'll touch briefly on trade shows and events. So Carabiner is a full spectrum marketing and PR firm founded in 2004. Anna mentioned that I'm in Atlanta right now, but our team is spread all over the United States, from California up to Boston and down into Florida. We specialize in B2B technology and healthcare clients, and we're listed in Atlanta's 20 largest PR firms by the Atlanta Business Chronicle. So we presume if you're here to listen that you're interested in doing business in the United States, or perhaps you already are. And just a few words about the United States in terms of a place to do business. We have a reliable economy with a long-term history of growth, as you probably know. And the economy here represents about 1/4 of global economic activity. And the gross domestic product is estimated to reach $25.3 trillion by 2024. That's a little bit more money than I make. US investors, you'd be interested to note, are increasingly funding German startups. The United States is a good place to be when you're establishing a global brand. There are some German brands that are already well established and much liked here in the United States. Interestingly enough, until fairly recently, I thought Bayer and BASF were American brands. People use Bayer aspirin here all the time for their headaches. And I'm an avid Volkswagen fan. I currently drive a Volkswagen and love it. And another funny story about brands being established in a country and people thinking that they're local. I actually was born and raised in the UK. And as a child, I thought that Ford, which of course is a US motor car brand, and Campbell's, which is a soup company, I thought they were both British brands when I was a kid. So that's a sign of being well adopted into a local branding culture. For us, German companies generate $348 billion in sales in the United States and employ over 538,000 people here in the United States, which is commendable. KPMG, the accounting and consulting firm, said the U.S. and Germany are linked through close economic ties and strong bilateral cooperation. The U.S. is the most important investment destination for German companies and will likely remain so in the coming years. It is also not surprising that the U.S. market represents the biggest source of net sales and profits for German companies, exceeding even the Chinese market. And I confess to being a little bit surprised by that when I came across that statistic. Before we get into the PR aspects or the marketing aspects of our presentation today, just want to touch on some key business considerations. So in addition to strategic services for growing your visibility in the United States, your PR partner can often help with introductions that can address a number of different things. For instance, the process of starting a business in the United States varies by state, and you'll remember that we have 50 states and that the predominant language is English, but Spanish is growing very quickly as often spoken second language, especially in the what we call the Sun Belt states, which are all the states that are on the southern part of the country. There are complexities when it comes to federal, state, and local taxes. I had the I think I'll say unhappy experience at the beginning of my career to work in Manhattan. That experience was good, but paying the taxes was complicated. I paid New York City taxes, New Jersey taxes because I lived across the river, paid New York State taxes, and then also US federal taxes. So I needed an accountant to help me out, and you will find similar things, and getting good accounting help will be important, and your partner here can help you with that. Of course, there are a number of legal needs for certain types of industries and businesses, and there are human resource regulations and other compliance considerations that you can get help with too. And then, of course, you'll need help with visas and work permits as well. There's some interesting US versus German nuances. What you'll find is many company leaders here are comfortable speaking openly and expressing their thoughts regarding their successes, strategies, but also their challenges. The other thing to note is that marketing in the United States is more about engaging the client, really sort of capturing their attention. Attention spans are really short here. I'm not sure if they're any longer in Germany, but here they're pretty short. And so that it's important to quickly focus on the need that you're solving or the pain. The technical details are important, but tend to come along a little bit later to provide proof. And interestingly to note that we're kind of mistrustful of details here anyway. That's a strange thing to say, I know. But unless those details are coming from a trusted source, we're a little bit suspicious of them. You may find that's the case over there too, but you can say good things about yourself all day long, and you would be expected to do that. But unless those details are coming from a trusted source, they're viewed a little bit suspiciously. So establishing your brand in the United States is a great way to establish visibility. It's a highly competitive market. And let me jump into the meat of our presentation today. So before I get into this, the next set of information, I want to say that the best product doesn't always win, at least in our market. The best marketing often does. And a humorous example, I know you have McDonald's restaurants in Germany. They were there the last time I visited. To me, that's an example of a product that certainly isn't the best, you may agree, but it's definitely extremely successful, mostly because of the marketing. And there are other examples too. I've been in the computer industry long enough to know and suffer through the days when the only real operating system was Microsoft Windows, and we all complained about it, but it was the one that went on to win because of the strength of its marketing. So your product performance alone won't really fuel your sales. What I'm going to highlight now, these are challenges, but are also opportunities for your business. And I'll highlight the challenges, then we'll talk about some of the answers that could come to you from what you do with your PR campaign. So B2B buyers are cynical, and it's important for you to establish trust and credibility. The market is crowded, and there's a lot of noise, and you'll need to figure out ways to cut through that noise. The competition is intense, and it's important for you to be able to differentiate your solution and to make yourself visible. A good example of this in the United States is there are lots of supply chain and logistics technology companies, just to take a very small example, but there's still a huge need for solutions. And so I wouldn't take the fact that the market's crowded to be a discouraging thing. It's just something to really address and work hard on in terms of figuring out how to get attention and to differentiate yourself. The other thing is that buyers need guidance. Thought leadership and influencer engagement are very important. And so they're looking for experts that can speak to them not only about solutions now, but where things are going to be going in the future for the next step. So let's talk about what we're calling your PR Toolbox. We talk about message refinement for American audiences. It's really important to address the need, to align with the pain, and talk about the solution. Message refinement could also be called alignment, and that means sort of taking a deep dive and looking at your customer. And if you've got a buyer persona, understanding them deeply, hopefully you've got the opportunity to do some customer interviews, but understanding what they're really trying to do and where their pressure points are, and then make sure that your messaging fits. The next thing in your toolbox would be to use media relations for securing news. I think that's fairly straightforward, and I'll emphasize why. The media really is a gateway to credibility. Another word for it really is credibility marketing, public relations, that is, and is extremely important. Americanized content is really important to feed the machine. What I mean by that is you'll need US customers and examples. That might be hard if you're coming to the United States without customers, if it's your first foray, but know that you're going to struggle a little bit, at least until you've got examples that come from US-based customers. And the reason for that is not that we're not interested in the successes that are happening in other countries. It's just that the media has shown that they are really mostly interested in examples from the United States. Excuse me. Thought leadership is important in order to build market credibility. This is done effectively through content that you provide, such as white papers or maybe surveys, your blog posts, research reports, speaking engagements for your executives in the right places, participating in industry awards, being involved with associations, I know that that's a big thing in Germany too. You have a lot of industry associations, and we also have those in the United States. And then memberships in appropriate places. These are, in fact, a great way for smaller companies to compete with larger companies. If you buy a membership in an association, it's not like a larger company can buy a bigger one. They're the same, and it's a great opportunity for you to network. Social campaigns are also an important part of your toolbox and a great way for you to engage directly with your buyers. Again, the media is going to be a step removed from your customer, but if you can engage via social, and by that we mostly mean LinkedIn, you've got a more direct contact. And then trade shows are important to augment your visibility and kind of establishes you as an important player. If you're not at the right trade shows, you become a little less visible, and perhaps it undermines what appears to be your commitment to the market. Let's talk about translation for just a minute. It's important for you to have a translator whose native language is American English for translating your marketing content, and your PR partner can then refine your messaging. And then have a US-based spokesperson who speaks fluent English and has a strong level of comfort with Americanisms. Now, you notice I didn't say that your spokesperson needs to be sort of native with American English. I think you can be from a different country and speak English well, but you have to be pretty comfortable with Americanisms. And given the fact that I originated in the United Kingdom and spoke English, I had some challenges when I first started doing business in the United States. I had an amusing experience the other day. I was in a meeting with a German company, and they were laughing with one another about wearing what they called Texas boots. And I wondered what that was for a minute and realized they were talking about cowboy boots. And so it was cute and it was funny, but still a slight nuance. You'll find in the United States, and this was a little bit tough for me in my first year or two until I got to know American sports a little bit better, that in business, sports terminology is very widely used. For instance, one of the terms that you'll hear is the whole 9 yards. And I remember hearing that initially in a business context, and I thought, well, what has that got to do with anything? Well, of course, it's an American football term where plays happen in 10-yard increments. And so when you say you've got to go the whole 9 yards, it means that you've gone a little bit, but you've got to go the rest of the way with full energy. You'll also hear people talking about a home run in business, talking about that as a success, and that's a term from baseball. And you'll also hear a basketball term. They'll talk about things being a full court press, meaning that you have to surround the market and work really hard. So you'll see that terminology widely used in articles, but also in talks that are giving, and your English-speaking spokesperson should be comfortable with that, with those kinds of analogies. Let's go on to media relations. I think I really want to stress on this slide, as you look at the bullets for yourself, relationships are extremely important. And that obviously goes true for you and your market as well. In the United States, we have and have had for a number of years something called the FBI Most Wanted list. So you're probably thinking, well, what has that got to do with business communications? Well, the FBI, of course, is one of our federal level law enforcement agencies. And ever since the sort of early days back in the 1850s, when cowboys were having shootouts in small Western towns, you may remember from looking at some of the old Western movies that oftentimes in the post office, there would be wanted posters. And it would be an image of a criminal or a bandit of some sort, and there would be a reward number. That process has gotten a little more sophisticated Now the FBI has what they call the most wanted list, and you can have a look at who they're looking for across the United States. We use this analogy when it comes to relationships with media that's going to really help you to be successful. We recommend that you develop your own version of an FBI most wanted list. And how do you do that? Primarily, you're going to look at trade media, and you're going to do some analysis, and hopefully with your PR partner to help you, and find out which of the media is the most influential and has the greatest impact on your customers. Those are the ones that then go onto this FBI most wanted list that you have. And those are the ones that you're going to seek to have a relationship with. And there are a number of ways to do that. Of course, you're going to try and meet with them at trade shows, but you'll also get an understanding of what kinds of stories they want, how they want to be contacted. And as you repeatedly cater to those needs, you'll find that you'll build a relationship with them over time. So a win for you would be to have a solid media strategy. This will definitely put you at the top of mind with decision makers. It's going to build your brand awareness, increase your credibility and trust. And of course, it will help your company become integrated into the ecosystem in much the same way that the big brands, German brands were that we talked about earlier. And it's going to prepare the ground for your future sales activities. There's an analogy that I think is very fitting at this point, and I hope it makes sense to you. Picture, if you will, a large ocean-going cargo ship, so the ones with the big containers on it. Once that ship is loaded up and heads out to sea, it requires a lot of power to get it going. But how does this relate to your PR strategy? It's very much the same thing in terms of the analogy. Your strategy, if it's loaded up with the right messages and pointed at the right influencers, and you give it the right amount of energy to make it move, you will then have the benefits of momentum. So just like a cargo ship is a wonderful vehicle for transporting a heavy load to a specific destination, so your strategy can do the same thing for you. It's going to carry your messaging directly to your audience if you do it right, and you'll get the benefit of momentum. Small caveat, you also get the negative side of momentum, which means if you pointed it at the wrong people and you're saying the wrong things, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to course correct. Not impossible, but course changes are made gradually when you're driving a media relations strategy the same way that they are a large cargo ship. We talk about the media a little bit more now. If you're involved in media relations in Germany, some of these things may seem similar to you. There are some big differences, however. So planning, of course, I'm sure involved in that, but successful media campaigns typically require 6 weeks of preparation in the US before you really start doing any of your outreach. Identify the right publications and reporters and personalize your pitches to them. What we're saying there is one pitch to everybody is not really the right way to go, especially if you're developing relationships. I think, get back to the FBI analogy, you're probably going to have no more than 20, 25 people on this relationship list. So it's very doable for you to have customized pitches to these people that you're getting to know. Use email. We don't really mail anything to the media anymore. I'm not sure that's done there either. And then do identify trends and topics and tailor your story accordingly. Journalists really like to talk about trends when they do their stories. Follow up is something you definitely can do. Garnering media placement is a much more proactive process than you find in Germany. We actually have heard from our friends, Anna will probably nod, that you probably get in trouble if you follow up with the media in Germany once you've pitched them. That's not the case here. And lastly, from an expectation standpoint, don't expect the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal right away. You can get that kind of coverage. And in fact, though, we have found over time that industry publications are actually better at delivering your target audience than going to a national business publication. Some of the realities that publishers are facing currently is that they've had to cut resources, so journalists are spread very thin, which means that they're more open to good pitches from you if you've done your homework right. And it means that you're going to be able to have good relationships with them because you're going to be helping them to do their job. There's a huge battle, though, to get their attention. 1 in 4 reporters receive over 100 pitches per week. Another great vote for having a relationship. You're going to open an email, answer a phone call, look at a text message from somebody you know if you're a reporter than from a blizzard of 99 other pitches. And then product facts aren't enough. The top factor is really relevance to trends. A word about building your visibility at trade shows and events. There's a broad range of shows in the United States, national and regional. There are industry-specific ones by segment, and they are really excellent when it comes to engaging an audience. I went to a regional show last week in Huntsville, Alabama. It's probably a town you haven't heard of very much, but it's actually where the U.S. Cybersecurity Command is headquartered, and NASA has large facilities there for its space program. And so there's a lot of really technical people in that area. And so I went to a cybersecurity show there, and people flew in from all over the country, especially experts from the Department of Defense and other departments in Washington. So there are some really interesting shows in unusual places. Thought leadership via what we say panel placements and speaker outs. What we mean by panel is, of course, maybe your executive becomes a speaker as part of 4 or 5 speakers. We have found too that if you go to trade show organizers with a suggested panel, for instance, your executive and maybe 2 customers and perhaps an industry expert, and if you suggest to them, listen, I've got a panel that's all ready to go, here are the things that we talk about, that they like that. And that, of course, is a great way for you to be directly in person in front of your prospects if you've chosen the right show. Sponsorships do create greater brand visibility, and there are often many variations for sponsorship levels at shows. Reporters are oftentimes at shows, and attendees do receive information before the show so that you can schedule meetings. And then, unlike in Europe with GDPR, attendees receive communications unless they opt out. So the setting is that they receive the communications, which makes it a little easier for us. So show your commitment. One of the things that's important, of course, is to demonstrate that you're in the United States to stay, that you're committed to the customers that you'll be serving. Native English speaking staff at some level is going to be really important for your contacts with the media, but also with your customers. US English language website, not UK English. There's a good few differences, as you're aware, between American English and English. And then English language content. So all of the sort of US English language, American nuances to put into your site are really, really important. So we're glad that you're thinking globally. Our encouragement is that you act locally, hopefully with the help of a US partner that can work with you to help navigate some of the things that you'll be doing in the United States as you expand and grow your business. So glad that you've taken this opportunity to be with us, and we'll now suspend the presentation part of this and take some of your questions.
Yes, thank you, Peter, for these interesting insights. So let's see if we have questions from our participants. Let's go to the chat and see what we have. There is one question, for example, should the German company start with a nationwide campaign, or do you recommend to pick out some states? If so, where to start best?
That's a really, I like that
question. Huge country.
Yeah, it's a big country. I would say the great answer is it depends. You'll find that certain kinds of businesses are concentrated. For instance, in the Atlanta area, because we're so close to a port in Savannah, and also have, I think, the world's largest airport, that there's a tremendous amount of logistics and shipping and supply chain businesses. And if you go to neighboring states, such as South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama, and this includes Georgia, you'll have major automotive manufacturing operations. I think BMW is in North Carolina, and Mercedes makes its SUVs in Alabama. Volkswagen is in Tennessee. And so in this region, in the Southeast region, if your business is targeting the automotive industry, you could focus on the region. What you'll find, though, is that the media is not regional, other than for local newspapers and perhaps business weeklies. Trade media is national. So it's really kind of impossible to target through your PR campaign a region. You'll find that if you do a placement in a industry trade publication, that it is consumed by a national audience, which includes the region that you target. So that may influence some of your decision. If it's a software product that you're bringing or some other kind of service that can be consumed nationally, I wouldn't be afraid of the size of the United States, given my last comment. The marketing does go national pretty easily. And even though it's a big country, I think you'll feel that you're just marketing to a country the size of Germany when you actually start putting your programs together.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Then let's see what other questions we have. One more is, do we need an additional editorial budget when we do PR in the US?
Traditionally, and this is changing, you don't have to pay in order to get editorial consideration. That really is changing, especially with some trade publications. If you do buy advertising, for instance, you may get preferential treatment. That has not been our tradition, but it's starting to happen. There are some other places where you can buy, I'm not sure the right word, a subscription or a privilege. For instance, the Forbes Council isn't strictly a money issue, but if you have an executive that they think would be qualified to be a thought leader, you can petition to join the Forbes Council. And if you're accepted, there's also a fee that you pay. But you do need to be accepted into it. So you could kind of look at that as a little bit of a pay for play. But in general, no. Part of that goes to this point I made earlier about how we're pretty cynical. We come from a marketing culture. I'm wearing a red jacket, right? We're flashy. We say good things about ourselves. We make statements that are sometimes exaggerated. There's not a sort of advertising board here that checks for whether statements are accurate. You can say crazy stuff. And people know that, and so they don't trust it. It certainly does get their attention, but they're not regarding that level of marketing as something that is information gathering. It's just attention getting, and you definitely need to do it. But And so pay-for-play editorials are viewed a little bit the same way, a little suspiciously. So I would, maybe have a budget, but look at it carefully.
Yeah, it's the same here in our country. So
Okay.
there is one more question concerning the role of press releases. Do you still issue press releases? How are they rated? Is it still a way to go, or is it old-fashioned, or do you still use them?
Well, I think they're back in fashion. They went out and now they're back. So there's a few things that a press release, I think, does a good job with. One is it allows you to cement your messaging and your story pitch internally. So you're going to write it and get your senior team involved on approvals, and that's always a great process. That's part of that sort of 6 weeks preparation before the pitches. You're not then going to use the press release to pitch your FBI most wanted list, right? You're going to take a customized pitch based on the story you've developed in your press release, and you're going to pitch to that particular reporter your story idea. Once interest is then shown, you can offer your press release to them because it will generally have more background, facts and figures. So the press release as a vehicle that will help you get stories, not particularly good, but as a vehicle that helps you get your process well planned and the message is approved is really a good thing. We still encourage our clients to issue a press release over a newswire, but in the scheme of things, it's done after the pitching is really done. So the pitching is done generally before the release date. We find that writers, if they're serious about writing a story, want the ability to work on it before the story is released generally. And that may be true in the United States. So you may have a reporter that likes it, but needs 2 weeks to conduct interviews and write the piece. And they want to be able to release the story at the same time as the general release, or maybe even be given the opportunity to publish it first. You can negotiate that. But when the release goes on the wire, it's a great way for the content to be searchable, right? It's a way to sort of stuff it up into the internet and have Google be able to see it. And at that point, then you can load it on your website and put it on your social media properties. And it does play a role in regards to that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So what else do we have? You mentioned only the big players in your presentation. What about the chances for mid-sized companies or startups with a limited budget? How can we conduct a successful campaign in the US?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a good question. I did reference some of the bigger brands, but at Carabiner, we only have a couple of clients that are sort of in the billions of dollars in revenue. 20% of our clients are startups, so they're funded through venture capital or early stage revenues. And then the rest of them are what we call growth stage companies. So they're doing $5 to $50 million. So they're not what you would call big companies. And so most of my comments, now I would say all of my comments, would also apply to startups and these mid-sized companies. I think by employing the same kinds of strategies, you can be on the same level with these global multinationals. And to some extent, you could probably be more nimble, and it might be easier for you to have relationships with the media, partly because executives at smaller companies are more willing to invest in those relationships than you find perhaps in Fortune 1000 level companies.
Good. I see one last question. It's about the role of social media. What role do social media play when I want to build up contact with journalists? Which social media channels do you recommend then?
Yeah, so we find that some journalists are on Twitter pushing their stories and their content, so they want to build their own followership. So it's important for you then to be a follower and for you to interact with them. Perhaps that's an ego exercise for the reporter, but something necessary for you to be a part of. LinkedIn, we find to be the most effective social platform for business communication and business relationships. And that's a whole separate webinar, I think, to get into some of the details. But as long as that's on your radar, there are a number of great ways to be effective using LinkedIn. In terms of using LinkedIn to develop and build relationships with the media, certainly it's a factor. We find that more direct communications are important in building those relationships. The messaging function of LinkedIn is as good as email, especially if they're using LinkedIn on a frequent basis. But from a posting standpoint, you can't always guarantee, as you already know, that the media is going to see what you post. You need to be more proactive in making sure they do. And then when they post content, typically we're not seeing a lot of that on LinkedIn because they have their own vehicles, of course, for disseminating their own content.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So that was the last question from our chat. Any further questions from the audience? Gibt es noch weitere Fragen? No, there's nothing coming in. Sie können uns natürlich auch jederzeit im Nachgang des Webinars noch Ihre Fragen senden. Das heißt, wir haben keine weiteren Fragen. Dann nähern wir uns dem Ende des Webinars. Ich bedanke mich nochmals ganz herzlich bei Peter Barron für die interessanten Einblicke in den amerikanischen Markt. Ich denke, wir haben alle sehr viel heute gelernt. Thank you, Peter, for being with us today. Ihnen allen wünsche ich einen schönen Nachmittag, einen schönen Abend. Bedanke mich für die Aufmerksamkeit. Ja, sage auf Wiedersehen und vor allem bleiben Sie gesund. Tschüss.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.